Welcome to Amplifying Leadership, a place where we talk with guests on their leadership journeys and hear about what they think is key to becoming a great leader. My name is Tara Lehman, and I'm a partner, coach, and consultant at Twin Life Coaching and Business Services, of which Amplifying Leadership is also a division. For our leadership clients, we support you through this podcast and various leadership growth services. To learn more about our Amplifying Leadership division and our leadership community, please visit amplifyingleadership.ca, as in Canada.ca. Today, I am welcoming Sean Thornton, a leader and founder of the successful New York City audio branding startup AudioX. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Tara. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Why don't we start a little bit about you, how you became a leader and even a founder of a startup? Tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, it's interesting because I sort of fell into this in a way. I didn't set out to start my own business or become a founder, but I worked in the audio branding industry for a number of years. And in doing so, I kind of saw these opportunities for how the sort of general approach could be refined and some opportunities for innovation. And then sort of through that process, I thought, well, maybe I could do this myself. After having a foundation in sort of the traditional audio branding industry, came together with a couple of my co-composers and folks that I had been doing sound design with, and we started this audio branding agency together, Audio UX.
And so when did you start your organization?
So it's been about 7 years now.
Wow.
So
Very
so
good.
knock on wood, things are
going well. Well, congratulations on your startup.
Can
you tell us a little bit about your workforce? Are they in person, hybrid, remote, a mix? What does that workforce look like?
Yeah, so we're technically hybrid, but I will say that we don't mandate that anyone comes into the office. So we have a recording studio in New York City. So when we're doing, composition or final mixing and mastering, it does make sense to get into the studio to be able to do that. But in terms of the rest of our team members, we're totally distributed. We have some folks that, work from different states, different countries. And so it's mostly a remote model with the option to come in.
Wow, that's awesome. So how did you decide on that?
Yeah, it's funny because in the beginning, when we started this company, we built it totally remotely. So I have 3 other co-founders. And when we started the idea and it started to take shape, each of us even were in different locations. So kind of has this history. Yeah. And it has this sort of history of being remote. And interestingly enough, as we grew a little bit and, as sort of the operation expanded, then we needed to get some kind of physical space and something a little bit more permanent for the studio.
Right.
So started remote, and then we moved to a more in-person kind of arrangement, and now we're back to fully remote or optional.
Okay, all right. So you probably had some challenges throughout the years with having a hybrid and a remote workforce. Would you share with us today maybe a few of the top challenges that you have seen over the years with that type of, especially also because you mentioned other countries? I'm curious about that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the number one thing is trying to create transparency without making anybody feel like they're being micromanaged, right?
Right.
You don't want to be looking over anybody's shoulder digitally or otherwise and saying, what are you working on today? And applying pressure in that way. So what we've really tried to do is create the opportunity to have transparency without it being such an active lift. So there's a couple tools that we use for that specifically. So the simplest one is a daily stand-up meeting. So oftentimes it's quick, 5 to 10 minutes, but it's a chance for the wider team to just share quick updates, everybody kind of get on the same page, and then we launch into the workday. The second is we have public workspaces in our project management tool. So we use Asana and Notion, and each team member has a space where they can prioritize their day, their week, and then their sort of long-term goals and what they're focused on. And those are visible to everyone at the company. So I can tap into somebody's area, take a look at what they're prioritizing for the day. If I have any questions, if there's anything I'm unsure of, it's also very helpful to understand everyone's bandwidth so I can get a quick sort of top-down look. And that's really helpful for us to kind of create that asynchronous communication.
I do like that idea of having that so that you're not micromanaging, but if you need to know something or they need help, that you can go in there and look at those things. So I think that's a great tool to have. So let me ask you this then, when it does come to having people in different time zones, and I used to work in a global company, so I remember being on a call one time at 9 p.m. Eastern, so because it was 8 a.m. or whatever for them. How do you deal with that? I'm not sure what countries that you may have employees in, but I know even just the US, and I'm in Canada, we have different time zones. How do you manage that so that everybody can get to the stand-up meeting and know their goals?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think this sort of connects to one of the other big challenges, which is this idea of work-life balance, right?
Yes.
When you're distributed and you're remote, it's a little bit easier to slip into that sort of work becoming your daily life, right? It's harder to sign off at 5 or 6 and say, okay, I'm done, right? Slack is always open. Gmail is always, coming in.
It's like that boundaries, right? Is that what you mean? Like setting the boundaries? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And so that can be really challenging if there is somebody, say 12 hours ahead. But that is where that asynchronous communication really comes in handy, right? If we can create the transparency in ways where someone can get up to speed, maybe in the hours when we might be sleeping.
Yeah, exactly.
that can really help. And I think sort of committing to those communication channels and making sure everyone's sort of aware of where they can look to get updates and where they can supply the other team members updates, that's really crucial.
Okay, great. Okay. So when you have meetings, do you do separate meetings based on time zones?
Yeah, and it really depends, right? Because some of our team members might be traveling, right? So maybe one week they're in a time zone where we have to join the meeting at 4:30 in the morning to catch them. Other times it might be the end of their day. So we're flexible about, kind of when it happens. And it really is just about communication, right? Understanding what everyone's sort of individual schedule looks like, what their availabilities are, and then sort of being flexible enough to make it work.
Okay. Since we were talking about communication there, I have a question around that. Because communication is so important with hybrid or remote workers. I mean, it is the way that you have to be held together as part of an inclusive team. Can you speak to us about that a little bit? Like, how do you make sure that people feel included, or just, it's such a different workspace than just going next door to the office or tapping on that shoulder? What are your thoughts on that, on communication?
Yeah, this is a big one. And I do think that there's some universal principles to apply here because, I mean, I think in general, everyone has a different style of communication or a style that they prefer, right? So I know some people prefer just to get maybe a brief, right? Where they just read what they need to be doing or get up to speed that way. Some people want to talk through things. Other people want to be hands-on and learn it through doing it. So I think understanding that as sort of a guiding principle to begin with, that you're going to have to account for these sort of different communication styles.
Right.
But then I think supplying sort of as many inputs in that regard as you can, right? So what we try to do is we have everything available asynchronously. So as the creative director, I'm doing a lot of creative briefs for our composers, for example. So all of that is committed to a workspace. So you can go there, you can bring it up, you can read about what the goals are, what the deadlines are, et cetera. But then we support those with actual in-person syncs as well. So in a way, it's sort of over communicating, as a sort of rule. But again, also just accounting for these different styles, right? Because some folks may just need to read the brief, other folks may need to read it and talk through it. So as a part of that, one big kind of push for us is sort of auditing our communication channels, right? Being very clear about where to go for certain information and where to go to communicate certain information. So if you have an organization where people are texting someone, and then you're talking through Gmail, and then someone's in Asana, and then someone's sending you a Slack, that creates more noise and more chaos. So I think if you can really sort of practice fierce reductionism around where and how you're communicating, and kind of push for that, right? So if somebody texts you during the workday and you know you're supposed to be talking via Slack, like just politely say, hey, would you mind sending me this message on Slack?
Right.
So that you're sort of reinforcing these channels so that it's more streamlined and everyone sort of knows where to go for what they need.
So do you have any communication like text that you insist or hope they don't use, and why that would be?
Yeah, I mean, text is a big one, both for GDPR compliance, like we don't want protected client materials going out via text, so we don't do that.
And I'm going to stop you there. I just want to make sure our audience knows what that is. That is actually the European privacy legislation, the GDPR. Sorry, go ahead.
No, thank you. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
I have a thing about jargon. I try not to use it, so I just broke my rule. Yeah, so text is a big one. And again, it's about creating transparency in a way that's easy, right? So we use Slack a lot. And one of the benefits is I can be on channels about individual projects that maybe I'm not even actively involved with, but just being able to see sort of the quick updates, it helps me get up to speed in a way that's sort of frictionless. So yeah, just be really intentional about that. And I know these days everything has an inbox and a comment feature
and a ding.
Exactly.
That's the text message, right? I hate getting text messages that, when I'm trying to sleep. So, I mean, I do turn off my phone now, but I like that you think about that as well, because I do want to come back to something you mentioned earlier. When I think text messages, I think, where's the work-life balance when you're texting me at 8:00 at night or at midnight? And do I feel that obligation to then go ahead and text back, which I've always encouraged anybody who has ever been under me as don't. No answering emails and text messages that late. You need your balance. So I want to touch back on work-life balance, which you did mention earlier. How do you support your employees with work-life balance, considering they're remote and considering some of them might just, as you almost mentioned, they mix life and work together, but we do need that clear balance sometimes. So how do you encourage that at your organization?
Yeah, it's a great question. And part of this, and this might seem a little reductionist, but part of it is building trust. Because I think when you're in an environment where you can trust one another that you're going to sort of get the task done and you're going to do what needs to get done, when it gets done, to me, is almost less important. So I think giving our team members the autonomy to say, I know what my priorities are, I'm going to accomplish them kind of around the things I need to do in my day. That is really important. To the other sort of part of your question around sort of creating those boundaries, for us, we reinforce it with, some of our tools, right? So setting your availability in Google Calendar is a big one.
Awesome.
Same thing with Slack. You can set when you're offline, essentially. And those things are helpful. Just a quick visual reminder. If I'm about to message someone and I forget that they're in Spain and it's a different time, it pops up and says, hey, by the way, it's 11 p.m. for this person. So those things are important.
I love that. And I love that you have an availability calendar. I encourage people, and always have, even when I was in my corporate life, but now my clients, is you're going to block time off for you. And you're going to treat that appointment like it is that rare doctor's appointment that you've been waiting 2 years to get. If that even means 20 to 30 minutes at lunch, block it.
Yes.
Don't let a meeting take place unless it's mandatory meeting and then you're going to block time after or before. But it's so important. And I love that you allow more of a flexible, I'm going to call it flexible working schedule. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's empowering everyone to kind of get the things done that they need to get done on their time. Again, it takes trust, right? It's not the sort of thing that you can meet a brand new employee and jump right into. I mean, maybe you have that sort of sixth sense about somebody, but I think working hard to sort of establish that level of trust and communication will unlock these things, right? And ultimately, hopefully, make it so that if somebody needs to run out for 30 minutes to pick their kid up from school or go to a doctor's appointment, whatever, it's not a big deal. It's nothing. It's like, great, fantastic. See you when you get back,
Yeah, and if their goals are being met and the work is being done and it's being done well, does it matter, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I love that. What do you feel is one of the biggest parts of leadership? Let's put aside what we've discussed already, but a big part of leadership that you feel leaders need to lead effectively, especially around these remote or hybrid teams or just in general?
Yeah. Yeah. So let me tie this back to our previous discussion
Yeah.
for a minute. So one thing that's very difficult as a leader is not only sort of ensuring that your employees and your team members have, good work-life balance, but doing it for yourself as well
Yes.
it can be really difficult because I'm a big fan of servant leadership. I'm very much about, like, let me take the garbage out, like you do the,
Yeah.
you do the
Yeah.
other work. It can be very difficult, right? Because when those emails come in as a founder, at 11 p.m. on a Saturday, it's like, okay, I should probably take care of this, right? This is like part of my job. But I think trying to sort of work hard at maintaining your own work-life balance, because if you're run into the ground, you don't have anything left to give to your employees, right? You can't show up for them if you're totally burnt out on both ends. So I think that's one big thing, and it takes work. It's something I have to work at all the time.
Oh,
right?
yes.
The inclination is to just go. So that was a big sort of lesson, and it's something that I work on a lot. And then the other thing is just empathy. It's a difficult thing to grow if you don't have it.
It's true. It's true.
And if you don't, maybe you should consider not being a leader. But
yeah.
it really should guide all of your decision making in a way, and it connects to everything. It connects to people's bandwidth, having enough emotional intelligence to say, hey, I know this person is overloaded. I'm not going to put something else on their plate.
Exactly.
And then even connecting to non-work related things, right? I think there's a sort of delicate balance between, you don't want to get into that situation where you're calling all your employees a family, and it's becoming this sort of strange toxic blend, right? Like maybe
too close
there.
type thing. Yeah.
But having enough empathy to understand if somebody, needs a mental break, or, needs a day off, needs an afternoon off, needs to not work on this one thing for a while because they've been banging their head against the wall. So trying to focus on being empathetic and being a good listener and a good observer, I think will take you very far.
I love all of those points. They're so important, and empathy, especially too, as some of our population ages, we then all have to take, care of our elderly individuals, as long as, maybe we have children as well. So having some empathy around those little barriers that can creep up from time to time if they do need that half day off. And I think it's really important. So yeah, awesome tips. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what is that big tip? That one thing, if they don't take anything else away today, that you want our audience to take away that helps them grow and move beyond some of the challenges and barriers around leadership?
Yeah, so short answer is the empathy piece is huge.
Yeah, it is.
And lead with empathy always. Take blame, not credit. Do what you need to do to lift up your employees in that way. But I think one of the biggest lessons for me that's been a healthy challenge is working at learning how to delegate, because it is not something that came naturally to me. And I think I'm on the end of the spectrum where I just want to shoulder everything and just do everything myself, which is not scalable, right? For all the reasons we've talked about, for health reasons, and also for business reasons as well, right? You're not going to be able to grow if you're trying to do everything as a single person. So for me, it really took sort of looking inward and learning, going and seeking resources to help understand the communication around delegation, and really the philosophy, right? Like what does it make sense for me to scale? How can I take pieces off my plate that maybe are things that I'm not super specialized at, or that aren't really my forte, and do it in a way that I'm not just dumping busy work on someone, because I think that's a balance, right? So that if you can sort of focus in on that and think about delegation as the idea of sort of taking mental stock of who can be the most effective from a tactical standpoint, but also weighing the empathy piece, I think that will take you far.
And I love that too, because you can analyze your team and they can work off their strengths and weaknesses and help each other out and give you the break. Like you said, that leaders, They tend to, especially people who are in startups of their own businesses, who own the business, they tend to just want to do everything, but you really do need to let go and trust your team in order to give yourself that break as well. So,
Absolutely.
great.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Take a day off and see what
happens.
Yes.
Take vacation.
Yes.
I'm an advocate for that. I've probably said it a million times on this podcast. Take your lunch and take vacation. It's needed.
I love it.
Unplugged. Well, thank you for a great conversation. So if people wanted to learn more about you or they wanted to find you online, how could they go ahead and do that?
Yeah. So the company, again, is called Audio UX. Our website is auxnyc.com. And again, yeah, we're an audio branding agency, but we're really sort of combining those principles with UX. So we're thinking, we're doing design thinking, we're thinking about empathy, we're sort of understanding the audio branding experience as the human experience. So
love it.
Check us out online. And one of the things actually that was interesting earlier is you sort of touched on a huge piece of our work, that idea of the text message going off late at night. That is a huge focus for us, right? We make sounds for apps, we make sounds for experiences. So sometimes silence is the best communication, and thinking about that from a human perspective.
I love that. Sometimes it absolutely is, right? Great. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is really a great conversation, Tara.
Awesome. Thank you to our listeners, of course. We hope you are taking away some tips from Sean today, and especially if you do have those different types of remote or hybrid workforces. Leaders do need to continually grow and develop for themselves and for their teams as well. If you want support and development, or perhaps you want to join a supported leadership community, please visit us at amplifyingleadership.ca, a twin life coaching and business services division, for all the details. Until next time, please be safe and be an amazing leader or leader to be.